Hello, it's Will Glasgow, the Australia's North Asia correspondent, coming to you from Chengdu. Now, the Prime Minister and his entourage and all the visiting journalists have flown out a few hours ago back to Australia. I stay on, Australia's only foreign correspondent working for Australian media in China. Now, it's been a huge week covering the Prime Minister here, and for me, a very interesting one. Life on the road following the Prime Minister around is not like my normal reporting environments in China. I mean, most assignments I'm met with obstacles, friction, closed doors, declined interviews, all the things that are commonplace in reporting on China in China. It's not for nothing the world's third worst reporting environment according to rankings. With the Prime Minister though, following him around, it's a different experience. Like, I'm coming to you right now from the Shangri-La in Chengdu. That's a 5-star hotel in one of the poshest parts of Chengdu, which is one of China's wealthiest cities. It's been, for the entourage, very special, very warm China that they've experienced. They've also not been flying on normal Chinese domestic airlines. They've not been checking in at normal Chinese airports. They're flying around on the PM's plane, of course, and they're going into VIP terminals. I did the Beijing to Chengdu leg, so I had that experience, and let me tell you, it's a very different experience. Now, the Prime Minister on this trip's been talking up Australians coming over here to see the place, as he's been on the Great Wall, doing his homage to Gough Whitlam, and yesterday in Chengdu for his day with the pandas with Bob Hawke. I mean, I would recommend to Australians, China is a very interesting place to come and visit, but if you've looked at the Prime Minister's vision as he's been going around, I just put a caveat out there for everyone that you may not have the same experience. Traditionally, or I should just say for everyone else, just about, they don't close off a huge section of the Great Wall so you're not surrounded by crowds when you go there. That was the experience the Prime Minister and all of us following around with him had this week, which is gorgeous, but completely special and unusual. Similarly, if you go to the Chengdu Panda facility, I've never seen them as active as I did with the Prime Minister, because we got to go before opening hours when the famously lazy animals have their one period of activity for the day. So look, I mean, they're small examples, but representative of a very special kind of trip the Prime Minister's had over here. He's dealt with a very special part of China. China's given him the full service. They want him to have a good time, and the Prime Minister's manner suggests he had. He seems to have had a ball over here. He's looked so relaxed. Partly that's because of the confidence he's got after his emphatic election victory, and also it's partly because of the way the Chinese system is clearly courting him. They've obviously identified the Prime Minister as a man they want to deal with. And they can see, like everyone else can, that he's most likely going to be the Prime Minister for at least the next 3 years, maybe longer. That's not a short period of time. It's almost the entirety of the rest of Donald Trump's term in the White House since his restoration. So it makes the Prime Minister a not insignificant actor on the world stage for China. Now, the Prime Minister's trying to take advantage of that to push the Australian national interests, and he's really been stressing economic and trade ties throughout the trip.
My government's approach to our relationship with China is patient, is calibrated and is deliberate. And it is aimed at cooperating wherever we can, disagreeing where we must, but engaging in our national interest.
He had the meeting in Shanghai with Australia's big 4 iron ore companies and their Chinese steel makers. That's the first ever overseen in China by an Australian Prime Minister, and it got into the official memorandum of understanding between China and Australia after his day at the Great Hall of the People, something the PM's very chuffed about, and which, if it pays off, could be very significant for Australia depending on the future of the green iron and green steel industry. It certainly sent a clear message that Australia wants to keep being a partner with China on that, which is, of course, Australia's biggest export, not just to China, but to anywhere in the world. It's worth 1/5 of all of our export. Now, the Prime Minister has been wanting to focus on trade, on economic ties and boosting tourism numbers, but of course, he comes in here during extremely pressing international times. I mean, the global order is in flux. Donald Trump is really straining the US alliance network. He's launched a trade war against much of the world, putting stress on an international system that Australia's hugely benefited from since the Keating era. The Prime Minister coming over here for the longest trip since Bob Hawke in 1986, a 6-night trip. That sent a clear signal that Australia is trying to warm up its relations with China, and I mean it has. This week that'd be one of the big takeouts. Australia, the Prime Minister, is tiptoeing beyond stabilisation. Now, there's all sorts of caveats to that. He wants growth in certain areas, but all the restrictions on Chinese investment and critical infrastructure remains. The Port of Darwin, of course, which the Prime Minister has said he wants to end, and is committed to, the end of the Chinese ownership of that. Well, he said it didn't come up in his meetings with Xi Jinping, but Premier Li raised it indirectly in his comments twice publicly, maybe more privately in his time with Albanese in the Great Hall. That has not been resolved on this trip. It's very important to make that clear. The Australian team thinks it's presented, it's a consistent face, it's shown respect to China, but it hasn't resolved that. The Prime Minister is not returning to Australia with a sort of green light that that's all good to go. The details and the process still need to be worked out, and it's quite possible that in the months ahead, that is going to return as a really big friction point in this relationship. Of course, Xi Jinping gets a vote in that, so it's over to him if he wants to tank the relationship again by resuming trade coercion, as has been threatened on social media and in some of the nationalistic outlets over here in China. But the Prime Minister, it's not resolved, but for now, he's feeling that this trip's created more space for him to do that. If he can pull that off, it will be a real triumph of his stabilisation formula, showing that the relationship can tolerate quite a lot of friction within it as long as the tone's managed in a certain way. Of course, if he doesn't, if China explodes after the treatment he's given them here, the very positive treatment he's been given here, well, there'll be a lot of his critics this week who will be extremely loud and crowing if that happens. Now, of course, the other thing that everyone's watching from this trip, including the Prime Minister and his advisors, is the American reaction. We haven't heard anything from Donald Trump about this, and of course we know the Prime Minister hasn't been able to get a meeting with Trump yet. As my colleague Joe Kelly reports in The Australian, his former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, actually thinks the Prime Minister's approach is just right. He thinks the Prime Minister should keep well away from Trump until the AUKUS review's done. He thinks that Donald Trump's probably so distracted, which he certainly publicly presents, that he'd barely know, if at all, that the Prime Minister has just spent this week in China. And also, of course, Donald Trump is someone who routinely speaks even more fawningly than the Australian Prime Minister about Xi Jinping, who he says is a great, smart, wonderful man. So the advice from John Bolton is keep your head down, engage with the American system, but don't worry about Trump. Well, we'll see. Trump, again, he gets a say in all this. So how this trip goes, whether it's been successful or not, is going to be determined by what happens next in the Australia-America relationship. On that one, it really is over to Washington. So look, the Prime Minister, as I said, he's on the plane right now, flying back. There's a lot for him to think about. He's clearly boarded that plane in a very good mood. There are some things that loom that could spoil that mood in the, I was to say months ahead, but in the Trump age, let's be honest, it could only be a social media post away, but we'll see. For now, the Prime Minister leaves feeling that he's put Australia's relationship with China in a better place than when he arrived, and he continues to believe that the improvement in ties that he's overseen since he was elected in 2022 is one of his signature foreign policy successes. This is Will Glasgow, the Australia's North Asia correspondent, coming to you from Chengdu.